Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My second episode about the history of board games is dedicated to Tactics 2, a war game designed in 1958 by Charles S. Roberts. Nothing that happened afterwards was planned or intended. Roberts' words are similar to Tolkien's ones. Robert was a military buff, but the Korean War was winding down and his decision to be a career soldier went awry and the war game became a classic. He would have learned the principles of war on a mapboard, all by accident. Also Lord of the Rings was written by accident. He designed two mapboards for Tactics. Only the second one was originally published in Tactics 1954 and the revised mapboard was used for Tactics 2. He founded the Avalon Game Company in 1954 to publish Tactics. Avalon was a part-time venture and the name came from a historic village near Robert's house. 2,000 games were sold. Yeah, it was a success, but he gained only $30. 4 years later, Roberts was back and determined to produce games on a larger scale. He had to change Avalon into Avalon Hill to avoid a conflict with a local firm. Gettysburg was selected because of the upcoming Civil War centennial. The first modern historic war game was born. Dispatcher was designed to appeal to rail fans, the first civilian title that opened a long line. Tactics 2 was not scheduled. It was republished simply to fill out the opening line. So we can affirm that the roots of our beloved hobby are to be found in Baltimore in 1958. 60 years later, it's time to celebrate Tactics 2 with an instructional video. Enjoy it and stay tuned. Bye. Well, here is the large four-way folded game boards. Well, we are talking about a 60 years old game, so the graphics are basic but pretty clear. The roads are in red, rivers in a light blue. Well, we don't know exactly the way they flow. Pay attention to the woods where they are not in green, and the mountains are only highlighted. Well, obviously no comparison with the modern war games. But we can affirm that Tactics 2 had the main components of a modern war game. A battle manual, combat tables, weather chart, and counters with NATO symbol. I want to show you the manual. Well, please have a look. I'm showing you two types of manual. Well, this is the 1958 version. Well, we have two 1958 version. Well, this is the version without the name of the author. On the contrary, in the Gun Road war game, or better, in the Gun Road version, you find the name of the author. On the contrary, this is the typical booklet that you find in the 70s version of Tactics 2. Then another news that we had to highlight, and it's the combat results table. This is a 1958 version. This is the 1963 versions. And this is the typical table that the players find in a lot of Avalon Hill war games. So Charles invented this table that where he gave the importance of the odds 3 to 1. Please remember that these tables found the interest of the Rand company. In fact, the Rand company was looking for such table to simulate better the war. So table, a product of Charles' genius, and last but not least, the weather chart. Well, weather chart, please remember that this is we can name it the second version. Why? Because in this case, well, for each season, well, players had to roll a die. On the contrary, in the 1958 version, there were the weather cards. So a difference, I think that the weather chart is better, but originally, well, players found these weather cards. Last but not least, also about the counters. Please remember that in this example, you find typical NATO counters with the NATO symbol. Please remember that the first counters, well, didn't have any symbol, but only infantry, armor, and HQ. So in the second version of tactics, we found the counters with the NATO symbols. Well, guys, it's time to play Tactics 2. I'm going to play it by using some changes that I hope they could improve the game system and make it a little more modern. So guys, let's play Tactics 2. Well, let's go with the example of Tactics 2. I want to show you the starting setup. If you notice, we have next to each formation the activation sheets that, well, the activation sheets are the first change, the first important change that I made to the game system. And actually, well, instead of moving all the units, well, the two players move each formation when they draw the corresponding sheet. So I'm going to take all the activation sheets, putting them into this coffee cup, and I'm going to start an example of game. Let's mix the sheets. Let's draw the first sheet. Well, second. So when you draw this sheet, well, the blue player can activate the second core. Well, the second core is here. Well, I'm going to move a little bit to the camera. So you can move the core. Please remember that in the game you have several kinds of HQs. You have an army group HQ that can activate all the units and all the HQs that are within 20 squares. Then you have the army HQs. You have two army HQs, the first army HQs and the second one. And when you draw the sheets of these two army HQs, you can activate the units belonging directly to the army, and the two core, the first and the second core, that depend on the first army, and the third and four core that depend on the second army. So at the moment I have drawn the second army, the second core activation sheet, and I can move only the units belonging to the second core and that are within 5 squares from the HQ marker. So no problem at all. I'm going to activate this unit. Well, please remember that each 3 squares along the roads equals 1 square. So I'm going to seize the first red city. Please remember that the red army has to defend 7 cities. On the contrary, the blue army has to defend 5 cities. So I'm going to move this armor 1, 2, 3. I'm using the bridge. These black rectangulars are the bridges, and I'm going to seize the first city. I'm going to move also these other infantry units 1, 2, 3. Well, so the second corps is seizing this city, the first city in the center of the map board. I'm going to form also a line of zones of control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to move the HQ and I'm placing it here. Please remember that the HQs doesn't have any attack factor, but it has got 1 defense factor. Let's finish with these armor units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the same about on the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's all. I have activated the entire second corps, and from since there aren't any attacks, please remember that the combats are mandatory when you have a unit in an enemy zone of control. You are obliged to attack. So let's place aside this activation sheet and let's continue. I'm going to I have drawn the first army. What does it mean? Well, placing this, so I'm activating this army, and I want to remind the players that from the first army will depend the second corps and the first corps. So each HQ army has a range of 10 axes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, 10 squares. So I can activate also the first corps. So the first army cheat can activate at the same time the second corps and the first corps. Well, I'm going to move against this second blue corps to show you some combat example. So please remember, the activation cheats, in my opinion, will give more interactivity to the game. And please remember, I defined this system introductory, but since we have a large map board, well, I would say that you have a lot of strategic decisions to make. So it's very interesting and it's very easy to teach, to learn. So it's perfect to introduce the occasional gamers to the principles of war and to the principle of wargaming. So I'm going to move the second corps. Well, 1, 2. Well, moving the armor 1, 2, 3. 1 and 2 square, 3, 4. Well, that's enough. So I don't want to enter enemy zone of control, but I want only to show you a combat example.
Anyway, I repeat, the game system is very easy. Movement and combat, and this change that I made is about the activation for each formation. And you have three kinds of formations: army, army group, and corps. So let's execute this attack. So you have 2 plus 2 against 2. Well, please remember that when you have a unit behind a river, this unit is doubled. So let's take our combat table. We have an odds of 1 to 1. So let's consider this column. I'm going to roll the die. And the die, well, I got 2 exchange. What's the meaning of exchange? Well, generally when there is an exchange, each player has to remove one combat factor. In this case, we should remove the armor unit and replace it with an infantry unit. Well, in this case, I'm going to remove both these units. So, exchange. And please remember that you have dangerous rolls on the column 1 to 1. 5 and 6, attacker eliminated, attacker eliminated. Let's execute this other attack. We have 3, 2 plus 1 against only 1. So we have another 1 to 1. Let's roll the die. 4, well, attacker back 2. Attacker back 2, well, the red army was quite lucky, so 1, 2, and 1, 2. Well, if you notice, the system is really easy. You can use the activation cheats. You can use the traditional rules. I recommend you to modify slightly also the victory condition. Well, for example, you can close the game when one army is able to seize the capital, the blue capital, and the red capital. As regards the airborne units, well, you can drop them not directly on the city squares, but well, it's prohibited, and you can drop them adjacent to the cities. Anyway, guys, I repeat, it's a very, very valid system to start our beloved hobby. The art of board wargaming is completely present and alive in this Tactics 2 that was created in 1958 by Charles S. Roberts. Stay tuned, guys. Thank you for your attention, and I hope to have you next time with the introduction to the game Alicia, included in the last strategy and tactics issue. Bye.